I never really considered myself either an environmental poet or even an ekphrastic poet. And then recently, I kind of saw that I do have a group of poems that respond to both. And I think for this particular poem, this idea of this arrogant narrator trying to say anything about nature just seemed so over the top. And how do you improve on nature? And the poem kind of led me quickly to this idea of, humanity is destroying nature, as if we can do nature better than nature itself, as if we can exploit it without consequences. And I feel like ekphrastic poetry in general, there's certainly respect for the original source of art or nature, but then there's this kind of arrogance that we can even say anything about art or nature, which is what I wanted to explore. I find white space really confusing, actually. When I read a poem, I struggle with, why did the poet use white space? Why did they add this extra space here? And I've been trying to learn over the years, and so this was my poem to try to experiment a little bit with that. And for such a sometimes large philosophical subject, I felt like the extra space allowed me to add some extra pauses in there, or to emphasize a kind of turn in the poem, or the poem kind of leans darkly into this idea of crime. I mentioned tossing corpses into the ocean, and I kind of related that to the crime of global warming. And so when I decided to add the world floats on war as yet another crime, I started noticing that I was kind of offsetting those darker moments in the poem and emphasizing them and giving a little bit of extra space in the poem. So like white space, I kind of struggle with, what form best fits the idea. And just knowing a simple, rule like, short lines are doing something different than long lines gives a poet this wealth of variety just with line length. And then looking at a poem on the page and how it looks and how it can resonate with, undercut, do something different with the photograph that you're writing from, is also a useful tool. And I think, really all this is about experimentation and trying different things in the drafting process, just to see how the poem evolves over time, and if that evolution, starts to suggest something deeper that the poem is trying to grasp.
Yeah, I love that. I think like the kind of creating an evolution of poetry is one of the really fun parts.
Revision is my favorite process of the poetry process. I feel like I struggle a little bit with getting ideas on the page, but revision is where I have a little bit of material that I can begin to experiment with and try different things with. And it's really a lot of play, actually. I think it does, definitely. While I don't have a degree in any of the sciences, I feel like I have a lot of experience in science and certainly took a lot of classes in it. And so, just from an idea creation standpoint in poetry, the sciences are full of beautiful revelations about the universe, from the earth and biology and the environment to space and the planets. And just also aesthetically, planets to me, and geology is just so beautiful. N.K. Jemisin writes science fiction about a fantasy world where the magic is related to geology. And so through her reading her books, I was really interested in this idea of bringing in my science background into my own writing and into my appreciation for the environment. And then also, nature is just beautiful, and it is art in itself. And so when we're making art, we're appreciating that, and I think relating to that kind of natural art that exists in the universe, and then whatever it is we're doing when we're playing with words and putting them on a page is responding to that. I think part of it is, you hear this recommendation in the craft of poetry to seek the specific rather than abstractions and ambiguity. And sometimes the humor is just there and being really specific. In that poem about kind of everything failing around this person, it almost became, I'm Generation X, and so a lot of the things I was relating to in the poem seemed to come right out of my childhood, and so there's these board games and movies and stuff from the 90s that I end up throwing in there. And the humor, I think, is coming from something that's familiar, something that's relatable. In the other poem, which I was watching a couple on YouTube for a long time, and then they hadn't put up a video in a while, and then later, as I was looking into it, they had broken up, and so there was kind of no reason for them to make videos anymore. And there was something really sad about that, and that that is not all relationships last, and I kind of wanted to have a voice in there that was this outsider looking in on this relationship that had come to an end, and that loneliness really stuck. And then, where there's humor, again, I think that's because I'm being specific. I didn't necessarily want to name who the couple was in the video, but I wanted to get into a little bit more specific details about it. And so also, because I lean into the dark, the kind of darker themes, darker ideas, there's just naturally humor in that, I think. I don't know why, but there can be humor. I think geology, for one, is something that keeps coming back. Again, it's this idea of landscape, the kind of fractal mathematics that's behind landscape. It's just so beautiful to me, and so I want to represent that in poems as well. And it becomes a metaphor for emotion, for relationships, for the struggles that people go to. And it's a way for me to, take people, whether it's on a YouTube video or whether it's a confessional poem, and set it against the backdrop of the universe, the landscape, the environment, and remind us that we're not that disconnected despite all of our technology, despite all our abstractions. We are still part of this very fractal universe that's around us. Pamela Uschuk, whose class I took and where some of these poems came from, She's a fantastic poet. She has a recent book, Refugee, that's just outstanding. And then there's other poets. I tend to be a lyrical writer, which can sometimes be difficult for readers to read. It can be, when I get critiques on my poems, sometimes people, I'm not sure what you're going for here. And so I started looking at poets that were more straightforward in their language to kind of pull me a little bit back to that other end of the spectrum. And Anders Carlson Wee is one of those poets. Edgar Kuntz is another one. Dorian Lex. They all have a relatively straightforward way of writing their poetry, yet there's such depth even in that straightforward language. Eleanor Kedney is another poet like that I really appreciate. And so I feel like I'm kind of tugged from the more lyrical poets and the more straightforward poets, and there's just such a wonderful spectrum of poetry between there.